All right, so biological theory of hunger is going to relate very closely to drive reduction, internal processes within our bodies that try to maintain homeostasis. Okay, so our body telling us, hey, dum dum, it's time to eat, or hey, put down the spoon, or put down the fork, right? And so, one of the most common ways that we recognize that we're hungry is our stomach growls, our stomach contracts as it tries to digest something that's empty. Okay, so it's trying to digest nutrients that aren't there. Well, we know that it's not our stomach that tells us, hey, we need to eat or we need to drink or what have you. It's our brain that tells us because the stomach sends messages to the brain to let us know, hey, you're feeling hungry. You're cranky because you're hungry. Go eat a Snickers bar or something. Okay, and so in order to study this empirically, to gather data rather than just subjective definitions of how hungry you are on a level of 1 to 5, they did this experiment where they put a balloon down someone's throat, which you'd have to pay me so much money if I were to do that. Now, it's not inflated when they swallow it, y'all. It's deflated. Then once it gets down to the stomach, that's when they blow it up. Right? And the purpose of this is so that it can press against the walls of the stomach. So whenever the stomach contracts, which is a sign that it's grumbling, that it's sending hunger pains, they wanted to see if the subject was also consciously aware of being hungry. Okay, so they wanted the subject to press this button each time they felt hungry. And what they found was that there was a correlation between stomach contractions and perceived feelings of hunger. Okay, so this is empirical evidence that our stomach plays some role, and some of y'all are probably like, yeah, duh, it plays a role, all right, that it plays some role in hunger. That's what this experiment shows us. However, it would be a misconception to think that the stomach is the only part of this process. Actually, what the stomach is doing is it's sending messages to our brain. Now, these messages are not very fast. Okay, these are chemical messages through the endocrine system. They're sending hormones and neurotransmitters to the brain to say, hey, we are hungry. So what part of the brain do they send that to? The hypothalamus is the part of the brain that controls hunger. You have the lateral hypothalamus, which you'll often see abbreviated as LH. This is what tells us we're hungry. When hormones come and stimulate the lateral hypothalamus, it's saying, hey, it's time to eat. How do you turn that hunger off? You stimulate the ventromedial hypothalamus, sometimes abbreviated as VMH. So lateral tells us that we're hungry. Ventromedial tells us that we're full. There are neurotransmitters and hormones in our blood that send these messages to let us know consciously we are hungry. It is time to start eating. So our body chemistry can influence when we feel hungry. Y'all have heard of glucose. Glucose gives us energy. Y'all may have heard in biology of ATP, the conversion of energy. Okay, so this is where we get our energy to do things. It's through glucose. This is our blood sugar levels. If your glucose levels are low, that means you are hypoglycemic. When your blood sugar levels are low, you feel hungry. Okay, so if you've ever had to give fasting blood at the doctor's office because they're like, we want to measure what your resting metabolic rate is. We want to see if your blood sugar is too high. You may be a little cranky and you may be more tired, okay, because you haven't been able to eat. Okay, that's why when you're hungry, it's very difficult for you to focus or to pay attention to anything, okay, because you don't have the energy to do so. Your body can't convert that sugar into energy to complete tasks. When your glucose levels are high, you feel full, which makes sense. If you eat something and that puts energy into your bloodstream, then you no longer need to eat. Now, how does our body maintain homeostasis with glucose? Well, through the hormone insulin from your pancreas. Now, not everyone is born with the ability to create insulin, so store-bought is fine. In fact, diabetes used to be a death sentence. Okay, with type 1 diabetes, you'd be diagnosed with it when you were young and just waste away and eventually drop into a coma because you were not able to regulate sugar coming into your body. until they figured out how to manufacture it in a lab. And now we've seen the life expectancies of people with type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes extend immensely. So they inject themselves with insulin to make up for the lack of insulin produced by their own body, and that helps to maintain homeostasis, that balance, okay, that relieves the tension that we associate with our drives, like our drives for food or for water or for stimulation. There are other neurotransmitters that are involved in influencing hunger, and you may be surprised that they're the same neurotransmitters that impact our mood. Now, if you are low on these neurotransmitters, you're going to feel hungry. If they're high, you're going to feel full. So this is my excuse for when I get hangry. Of course, I'm angry and cranky. I'm hungry. I do not have enough dopamine. Okay, now norepinephrine is adrenaline. Adrenaline gives us energy. You may remember that when our adrenal glands are stimulated and they release adrenaline into our bloodstream, that our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest system, shuts down. We don't need to focus on digesting food. We need to focus on escaping the threat that has just entered into our perimeter. So when you have a lot of energy from adrenaline, you don't need energy from glucose. So you feel full. You stop digesting. Okay, that's something to save for later. Dopamine is the pleasure chemical, which is why eating feels so good. Okay, with why it fills the void in my soul is because it sends dopamine to your nucleus accumbens. Okay, so too little of this means that you're going to be bored and you're going to be sad. Okay, so food equals happiness. You heard it here first. Serotonin helps with regulating depression. So one of the symptoms or the signs of depression is when someone starts eating too much or they start eating too little, they start sleeping too much, they start sleeping too little, and that's because their serotonin levels are off kilter. They cannot maintain that homeostasis. Now, how do you get serotonin without getting it prescribed? Well, it is present in tofu, it's present in eggs, cheese, which by this time that should mean that cheese has cured my depression because I eat so much of it, and salmon, as if I could afford that. All right, so cheese, salmon, tofu, and eggs, this is where you can get. That's what I don't understand about the stonk market, where they're just like, you had an entire generation play Animal Crossing and you didn't expect us to learn something? Like, that's where I like to live out my fantasies, like ever owning my own house or paying off debt. Okay, so tofu, eggs, cheese, salmon, that leads to increased rates of serotonin. So it makes sense that as a person goes through depression, their hunger levels may fluctuate. So back to the hypothalamus. What does it tell you to do? Well, the lateral hypothalamus tells you that you're hungry. When it gets messages like hormones that stimulate it, it says it is time to eat. Now, if your lateral hypothalamus is lesioned, which is another word for damaged, then that means you will never feel hunger again. You may be starving, but you wouldn't know it unless you're like feeling your stomach and you're like, oh, there's an earthquake in there, right? Okay, so this could lead to extreme weight loss. So the way to remember this is LLL. Lateral hypothalamus, when lesioned, makes you lean. Lateral hypothalamus, when it's lesioned or damaged, it makes you lean because the lateral hypothalamus, when it's working correctly, stimulates hunger. The ventromedial hypothalamus, by contrast, tells you when to stop eating. When the stomach sends messages saying, hey, you're full, okay, that's when your ventromedial hypothalamus tells you not to eat. If that's damaged, then you will never feel full again. No matter how much you eat or what you eat, you will never be satisfied, which sounds awful. Leptin is an anti-obesity hormone, which is released by fat cells that become too bloated. So when your body notices, hey, we've got a lot of fat, we should probably stop eating, that's what stimulates your ventral medial hypothalamus to say, hey, they're good, we have enough energy, we don't need to keep doing this. Ventral medial, if it's lesioned, then that can increase your risk for obesity. Whereas ghrelin, another hormone, is a hormone that stimulates your lateral hypothalamus. The ghrelin hormone is a hunger hormone. The leptin hormone is a satiety hormone, telling you to stop eating. All right, so again, leptin is produced by your fat cells when those levels rise, and so the body is telling you to stop eating, and it's telling you use up this energy, burn up this fat instead of glucose. So leptin stops hunger, so it goes to the ventral medial hypothalamus. Ghrelin is a hunger hormone, so it stimulates the lateral hypothalamus. Okay, so this satiety hormone is also known as an anorexigenic, okay, which may sound familiar if you've ever heard of the eating disorder of anorexia. People who are suffering from anorexia often very tightly control the amount of calories that they consume. Okay, it's often a symptom of OCD or a symptom of traumatic abuse in which they try to exert some control over their environment, and the one thing they can control is how much they eat. Okay, so when you look at leptin, it is an anorexigenic, which tells you that it's trying to get you to stop eating. And we're going to talk about body dysmorphia and bulimia and anorexia later in this lecture. Okay, whereas the ghrelin hormone actually stimulates your hunger. Okay, and there's also another one known as orexin. Orexin is a hunger hormone that not only plays a role in hunger, but also plays a role in sexual behavior and in wakefulness, so in terms of your stomach. Okay, now ghrelin is released by the stomach, which then sends it to the lateral hypothalamus, telling you that it is time to eat. In addition to your individual biological influences on your hunger, you also have a heritage that influences your hunger or your weight. This is genetic influences on weight. Okay, so the number of fat cells that each person is born with isn't the same across the board. Okay, some people have more than others to a certain extent. Okay, so genetics can determine your risk of possibly having obesity later in life or diabetes later in life. Okay, and this affects your set point and your metabolism. Now, the fancy way to say metabolism is basal, okay, your base metabolic rate. Okay, this is your resting state. What is your metabolism when you're not doing anything? Now, at my age, my metabolism has severely dropped. So I'm not burning as many calories by just existing. Whereas when I was a child or a teenager, I could eat entire packets or entire packs of Oreos and not gain a single pound. And, all of my parents, my grandparents, older people, they would just be like, oh, you just wait. You just wait. And I'm like, whatever, boomer. And then I got to this age and I'm like, snap. Okay, so when you're young, your metabolism is high. You can eat whatever you want and has no effect on your body, it seems like. When you're older, however, your metabolism starts slowing down. Okay, you're not able to expend as much energy and to burn as much fat. So now if I'm even in the same room as food and I smell it, I gain weight. Your set point is your body's ideal weight. Now, this doesn't mean society's ideal weight, okay, because that's a social construct. This is talking about your body's ideal weight. Think of it as a weight thermostat, okay? Just like with your temperature, you want to be somewhere around 98.6, unless you're using the thermometer at the front of the school where it's like, you're 85 degrees. And it's like, okay, I think that might be wrong. Okay, so your ideal temperature is in the 98s. If it drops too low, your body responds by making you shiver to get your temperature up. If you get too hot, your body responds by making you sweat to try to use evaporation to cool you down. Well, hunger works the same way. When your body falls below its set point, let's say you're normally 150 pounds, I wish, but you drop 140, right? You lose 10 pounds for whatever reason. That is going to send messages to your body to say, hey, you're falling below weight. We need to get you back up to what you were at before. So your hunger increases and your metabolism slows down, which is why people have issues with dieting to lose weight. Because if you start limiting your portions and you start losing weight, your body is like, wait a minute, this isn't normal. Are we in the middle of a famine? What's happening? Why can't we get food? And so your body thinks, ah, snap, I need to store up my energy. I need to save it as much as possible for when I need it because I don't know when my next meal is coming. Okay, so your brain knows, no, I have food, I just have to wait because I'm on a diet. But your body goes into panic mode and it decides we're going to slow down our metabolism so we can reserve energy so we can get that weight back on. Okay, so completely counterintuitive. But think of it in an evolutionary perspective, that would make sense. Evolutionarily, if you start suddenly losing weight, your body is going to say, whoa, 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 this is much too fast. Something must be going on. We need to react to this situation. And so it tries to preserve that energy for you. Okay. Now, not everyone's metabolism is going to be the same. So even though younger people tend to have higher metabolisms, that's not necessarily going to be true for everybody. And you can also have other glands that get in the way of that metabolism, like thyroid issues. So if you have hypothyroidism, okay, that's going to lead to you gaining weight. If you have hyperthyroidism, that's going to lead to you losing weight. So it's not just your stomach, it's not just leptin, it's not just ghrelin, it's not just in your head. Okay, there are multiple biological factors that can result in you gaining or losing weight, either in a healthy or in an unhealthy fashion. Remember that for free response questions, you got to do TAD, term, apply, define. So pretend you're a business owner. You made a lot of money on the stock markets, and your profit depends on worker productivity. You have 5 workers, each of whom responds to a different method of motivation. So worker number 1 needs instinct perspective. Number 2 needs incentive-based theory. Number 3 needs drive reduction. Number 4 needs arousal theory. Number 5 needs Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Explain how you as a business owner would use those different methods to influence the productivity of your different employees. And don't worry about being ethical. You can write about unethical stuff if you want. Although last period really took that seriously. They're just like, okay, we're going to try to make every single one unethical. And I'm like, okay, guys, you little sociopaths. I love you, but I never want to work for you. And you can post your answers in the chat and we'll go over them together. The incentive theory states that motivation to complete a certain task increases when the incentive to do such tasks are increased. By offering your employee a raise when they increase their productivity, the employee's motivation will increase, leading them to completing the given task of working more productively. Good. We've done 1 out of 5. The incentive theory. That should be like number 2 of the 5, I believe. Instinctive motivation refers to the responses acquired through evolution to help an organism survive. By placing a shock collar on the first employee, you would be able to control their schedule by capitalizing on their instinctive fear of pain. All right, so I like that because that very easily could have moved over into behaviorism, that could have moved into the incentive theory of, oh, well, incentive could also refer to trying to avoid negatives, but you specifically described their instinctive, okay, aversion to pain. And so that's what made that definition and application applicable. Someone else for instinct theory? The instinct evolutionary perspective means that someone is motivated by biological internal motivations to do something. Well, that refers more to drive reduction. Okay, if you're talking about internal factors, like external would be incentive, internal would be drive reduction. Okay, and instincts are something that you don't have to learn how to do. Okay, so that's probably going to be the more difficult one for y'all to answer, is because what instincts do humans have except for their instinct to avoid pain, which is why I like that example of shock collar for the avoidance of pain, even though he specified how it was different from incentive theory. Okay, so incentive, a raise, that's pretty, obvious in this situation. Like if you give them more money, that could be a good motivator, although you could also run into the over-justification effect, where instead of doing it for intrinsic reasons, they do it just for the money, and thus their motivation decreases. Okay, remember that drive reduction is internal, and that's talking about internal drives like hunger, thirst. Okay, so we're trying to break the tension when homeostasis gets out of whack. So we try to bring balance back to it. So we've done this one and we've done this one. We've still got 3 to go. Maslow's hierarchy of needs states that there are certain environmental and emotional needs that must be met for people to achieve self-actualization. Good definition. Attempting to financially and emotionally aid your employees may allow them to approach self-actualization, potentially making them more motivated. So they don't have to worry about the bottom levels of the hierarchy. They got that covered because they're working for you. So you want to continue to have them working for you, and so they'll work harder in order to maintain, that job. Good. Number 5. Someone in arousal theory said, the arousal theory refers to people's drives to achieve an optimal level of arousal or interest. Good definition. Giving workers challenging but achievable tasks throughout the day will keep them interested, but not overwhelm them to the point that they are no longer aroused. Excellent. You're specific by saying, hey, challenging but not overwhelming, because that could lead to them giving up and being discouraged. Okay, someone said, would temperature count as a drive? That is an internal process that you're trying to maintain. So it says, like, if I keep the store at 123 degrees, I'm pretty sure that's against the Geneva Convention, but okay. Every time they make a sale, I decrease the temperature by 1 degree. Okay, first of all, you're not going to get any customers in that store if it's 120 degrees. But okay, I'll take that as internal. Okay, your internal drive for homeostasis with your temperature. And so that motivates your behavior to sell more. Okay, or to maybe if it's too cold, you move around more. So instead of letting your employees just sit around and lounge around, if it's too cold, they're going to be motivated to keep moving and possibly keep selling or keep building or whatever it is that they're doing. Excellent. So we have addressed all 5 of our motivation theories we covered, but also some external factors that play into when we eat and how much we eat. Okay, so we talked before about the biological factors like our hypothalamus, the lateral hypothalamus, and the ventral medial, the impact of hormones like ghrelin and leptin and dopamine and serotonin. But that deals with like, oh, you feel a hunger contraction, so you must be hungry, so you eat. You're going through drive reduction, and there's a tension, so you're trying to get back into homeostasis. Okay, so now we're going to move into the additional factors that affect when we eat. Okay, time has an effect on hunger. When it gets time for breakfast or time for lunch or dinner time, culturally, we have different understandings of when it's time to eat. Like my dinner time is around 5 p.m. So when it gets to around 4:30, I start thinking, hey, maybe I should start cooking, or maybe I should start looking for coupons for Domino's, whatever my fancy is. For other people, you may eat very late in the evening, like 7 o'clock. That would be late to me. Or you may skip breakfast. So in the morning, you may not feel hungry. Whereas if you have a habit of eating breakfast every morning, then you are going to feel hungry when you wake up. So we are told when it's time to eat based on when we're told to eat. So y'all, your lunchtime is after 12:05 until 12:35, in time for you to get back to your 6th period class. So 5th period, you might start feeling a little peckish. But 6th period, okay, you're probably full and you're like, okay, eating time is over. I have until 5 o'clock, or maybe snack time is after 7th period or during 7th period. Who knows? You could turn your camera off and you could eat a whole meal and no one would be the wiser, right? And I'd be jealous because I can't make you share it with me like I would in a normal class. Be like, did you bring enough for the whole class or for just me? An example of this is how time can affect hunger and how memory can affect hunger is that amnesia patients, okay, who have retrograde amnesia and cannot remember what's happened in their past, they can't form any more long-term memories. When they cannot remember their last meal, if you put food in front of them, then they will eat it as if they are hungry. Okay, so if they can't remember the last time they ate, they tell themselves, I must be hungry. It must be about that time to eat. And so that leads them to feeling hunger, not just stomach contractions. Now, some of this deals with reinforcement versus punishment. So remember, reinforcement is when you're rewarded. You can be positively reinforced by giving something that you want, or you can be negatively reinforced by having something you dislike taken away. And so if you reinforce good habits and punish bad habits when it comes to eating, children will often learn to eat healthy. Okay, those behaviors will continue into adulthood when they are independent enough to choose how and what they want to eat. Now, what is the name for this type of conditioning that affects voluntary behavior?
Operant conditioning?
Operant conditioning, good. Okay, operant conditioning, that is where voluntary behavior is adapted. Involuntary behavior is classical conditioning. Now, that can relate to taste aversion. Okay, when we learn that we like some food or don't like some food because we associate it with an illness, that's classical conditioning. Okay, where we're involuntarily taught to not eat a certain kind of food because of our past experiences with that food. But that's not the only way that we learn what to eat or what not to eat. We also have modeling. Who buys the food in your house? The parents. Okay, so you're not going out to the grocery store and filling up the cart with candy bars. Okay, your parents are the ones that decide what you eat for dinner or what you have available in the pantry to eat. Okay, so modeling, observational learning plays a role in the eating habits that we develop. So if our parents eat junk food or they don't cook or they don't teach us how to cook or they just order out, then we are going to follow in those same habits when we become adults. Versus if your parents teach you about portion size or how to cook for yourself, then you're going to develop those eating habits due to the impact of observational learning. Okay, another example with taste aversion. People who undergo chemotherapy as a treatment for cancer often feel nausea or a loss of appetite. If they don't associate it with the treatment, then they could associate it with the food that they're eating. So if they're getting chemo and they're eating their favorite meal, they may develop a taste aversion for that favorite meal. And if you don't like the taste, if you don't like the food, then you're not going to eat it. Does that make sense so far? In terms of positive and negative reinforcement, an example of this could be you finish eating your vegetables to stop something, to stop your mom from arguing with you about eating your vegetables. What type of reinforcement is that? You're doing the behavior in order to stop your mom complaining. Good. That is negative reinforcement. By eating your vegetables, the aversive stimulus of your mother's voice is removed. Okay, what about to make your grandma happy? You're doing the behavior in order to get a desired stimulus. That is positive reinforcement. But oftentimes we associate positive reinforcement with reward. For instance, if you're a part of the clean plate committee, then you get dessert. If you don't clean your plate, then that means you must be too full for ice cream. Okay, so this is going to reinforce those behaviors of eating things like Brussels sprouts, which as a kid I would think were gross, but now that I'm old, Brussels sprouts are fine. Lots of things change. Like you get excited about different things. Like I'm excited about a pillow. I'm like, oh yeah, my pillow shipping from Amazon. Like that's the highlight of my day. Or when you start testing out mattresses. When you're a kid, when y'all's age, y'all could sleep on a concrete slab and wake up fine the next day. I could fall asleep on a literal cloud straight from heaven and I'd still wake up with a crook in my neck. I'm like, I straight up had to go to the doctor once because I got out of bed and messed up my neck. Like I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't lifting anything. I just literally got myself out of bed and immediately the universe was like, bad choice, Jackie. And I had to have someone take me to the doctor because I couldn't move. I almost passed out from the pain. I was just like, oh no, I've broken my spine. This is why I shouldn't get out of bed ever. This is my new home. All right, are we good on reinforcement? In addition to punishments and rewards for certain eating habits, we also have cultural influences. And this is going to vary by culture, whether it's Western culture or if it's Eastern culture. Now, there are some preferences that are universal. The preference for sweet food or sugar, that's something that all cultures have. Though American culture is very, very heavy on the sweet side of our foods because it releases dopamine that stimulates our nucleus accumbens. Remember that your nucleus accumbens is the pleasure center of your brain. So eat sugar, feel good. Okay, salty foods. That could be for drive reduction. If you don't get enough iodine in your diet, then your neck swells with a goiter. Okay, you want to maintain that balance between hydration and having enough salt in your diet because you require salt in order to live. Okay, so some of that's universal. It doesn't matter if you're in the east or the west or the north or the south, you're going to like sweet and salty foods. However, we do have some specific habits as we live in the west when it comes to certain foods. Like our diet is very heavy on meat. Okay, so to Western culture, steak is a good food. It's a highly valued food. Whereas if you're from an Eastern culture, say for instance, if you were a Hindu believer, this would be disgusting. Okay, because it comes from a cow. So cultural and religious differences can determine what is food and what isn't food. Most of the world eats insects as a source of protein. It's a Western culture that really sees this. Yeah, I can see your face, Nathan. You're like, what? This is a source of protein. This is a snack. You can find it in candies. You can have them chocolate roasted like almonds. You can have them crushed up and put in your food. You know, this is a delicacy in some places. All right. But for Western culture, we would look at that and say, I'm not eating a bug unless I'm on Fear Factor and there's money involved in it. Okay. One of the favorite things that they used to do in our AP trainings is they said, give your kids a chocolate covered cricket or a chocolate covered worm and see if they'll eat it. You know, ask them like, would you eat a bug? And then see if they'll actually do it. And so they did that at our training. They gave us chocolate covered insects and I ate one and it kind of tasted like peanut butter. It was like a really uncomfortable Reese's cup. So imagine if you're handing that out for Halloween. You're like, no, it's okay, kids. It's just mealworms. It's chocolate. It's fine. No one would come to your door to be like the person who hands out toothbrushes or apples for Halloween, a pariah. What else about that? So we have Western concepts of what is good to eat and what's not good to eat versus other cultures like Eastern cultures where those norms may be different. For instance, in Korea, a spicy cabbage, kimchi, okay, that's a common staple in their diet. American version of that would be coleslaw. So whereas kimchi is more on the spicy side and served cold, coleslaw or Yankee kimchi is on the sweeter side. And we love our mayonnaise. I do love mayo. It's my culture. You once got a Bible on Halloween? Interesting. Was it like a big one or one of the little tiny ones? It's like New Testament.
It was like, so she opened the door and she had M&Ms in one hand and a little Bible in the other. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be a good person. And I chose the Bible and she put $1 in it. And I was like, nice.
So she is positively reinforcing Christianity for you.
Yes.
Here's a Bible, but also $1. I don't know. I feel like the M&Ms would taste better. You got a pickle in a bag, Roll Tide. That is such a Southern thing. Like, you've ever been to a gas station or a Piggly Wiggly, and like you just see a spicy pickle in a bag, and you're just like, God doesn't live here. Although I'm sure it tastes very good. I don't feel like I could ever make myself purchase a bag pickle. I feel like that I would be falling down a few levels in self-respect. It was the only option, and he was just handing them out. The other option was to say, no, I don't want your bag pickle. Did you eat it? No? Did you like throw it away or give it to a younger sibling? Give it to your brother. That's right. Just be like, I really want this pickle, but I love you, so I'm going to share it with you. Or if you've ever heard of pickled popsicles, that's a thing. Yeah, you freeze the pickle juice. Yeah, I know, Nathan. Yeah, we're very weird. Sprite is too spicy, but pickle juice, that's our thing. All right, so let's do a little bit of review. Question number 1, and answer in the chat. Don't hate on the pickle pop. Yeah, I read that as pickle poop, and I got really confused. And I was like, what has God created? What motivational theory states that we are constantly aiming to be close to homeostasis throughout our day? Is it instinct, incentive, optimal arousal, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or drive reduction? Okay, those of you who have answered in the chat so far are correct. Okay, so going through each of these. Instinct theory. What is an instinct? How do you get an instinct?
You're born with it.
You're born with it. It is innate. You don't watch somebody else do it and then copy them. You're not rewarded or punished for the behavior in order to develop it. You are born with that instinct. Okay, that has nothing to do with your internal drives, like your internal drives to satisfy thirst or to satisfy hunger or sleep. Okay, these are internal. Incentive is external behaviorism, so that can't be the answer. Optimal arousal deals with your interest levels in something, whether it's challenging enough or too challenging, and whether or not you get bored. Maslow's hierarchy of needs does have basic needs at the bottom, but it's beyond just the needs for survival. It goes all the way to self-esteem and self-actualization and transcendence. So drive reduction is our answer here. We have an internal drive known as homeostasis. When we are in tension, like if we don't have enough water or enough food, that eggs on our drive, which energizes a behavior. It motivates us to eat or to sleep or to drink. And question number 2, an internal balanced state in which we do not feel we need anything to eat or drink, and we are not lacking in sleep, is known as what? Good, Nathan. Nathan, you doing that reminds me of like this meme of this guy that was on trial, and like they're reading, the things that he said. He's like, "You're thicker than a bowl of oatmeal," and he's like, so now when I see that, I just think, oh, thicker than a bowl of oatmeal, which is high praise. Oh, we're going to talk about changing beauty standards throughout the generations, and we're going to talk about how, like, back in my day, there are some certain beauty standards that they're like, Like today, I heard all of this about people making fun of millennials with their middle part and their skinny jeans, and I'm like, excuse you. Back in my day when I was in middle school, we would overpluck our eyebrows so they were super thin and way too far apart, and having a butt was a bad thing back then. And now it's through the exploitation of African-American culture, like with the Kim Kardashian, now we see that changing. Yes, the answer to this is homeostasis. That is in our internal balanced state that we want to maintain. When it's not maintained, we get a drive, an internal drive that tells us you need to eat or drink or sleep. Remember, an instinct is something you're born with, like knowing how to make a nest or knowing to fly south for the winter. Okay? An incentive is a reward, and optimal arousal deals with interest, okay, cognitive rather than biological. Okay, so the answer here would be B. 3. Which of the following is the ultimate goal of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? I'll give you a hint. It starts with self. Excellent. All of y'all are answering A. Now, that's not the only thing on the hierarchy of needs. That's just the highest level, the most difficult level to get to. Self-esteem is on there. Basic needs like food, water, shelter, and Wi-Fi is here on the bottom. But the ultimate goal is to get here. And then eventually, once you have become self-actualized, you can help other people become self-actualized through transcendence. It actually may need to be an A. Transcendence, helping others to level up, as it were, on this hierarchy. Question 4. Which of the following most accurately describes motivation in a broad sense? Not a specific theory, just how would you define a motive or motivation? All right, good. It looks like most of you put C. A complex behavior that is rigidly patterned through a species and is unlearned is instinct. A positive or negative environmental stimulus that motivates behavior is the incentive theory. And remember, it's not asking you for a specific theory that explains motivation. It's asking you what is motivation. A tendency to maintain a balanced or constant internal state is drive reduction. A need or a desire that leads to behavior, that is motivation. You are motivated to eat or drink or sleep. We good so far? All right, last review question. Which of the following is an example of a secondary motivator? And secondary means learned. It is not innate. Good. All of y'all are putting D. Money does not inherently have value. It only has the value that we give it, kind of like GameStop shares or AMC or Bitcoin. Okay? If you give a baby $1, they're probably just going to eat it or something. They're not going to know that it's valuable, right? These are primary motivators. And the thing about secondary motivators is that you use them to satisfy your primary motivators. So can you use money to get sex or food or water? Yes, you can. Okay, all of those are primary motivators. Are we good so far?